On June 1st, 2009, as the night drunkenly enveloped us, an Airbus A330 on its way to Paris hovered just above the dark waters of the ocean. On that plane, the 228 passengers and crew had fallen asleep, unable to relax, and the pilots in the cockpit were silent. But on this night, not only was there silence, but the unseen shadow of danger lingered for a moment behind the plane. At high altitude, as the distance from the ocean increased, the plane's engines worked monotonously. For a moment, everything seemed normal, but something was wrong. Some time ago, one of the speed sensors had been blocked by a frozen sheet of ice. The plane could no longer measure its speed accurately. In that unknown space, where speed cannot be measured, everything can be thrown off in an instant. The plane was now flying at an unconscious speed, but the pilots did not realize it. At first, everything was normal. But suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere in the cockpit vanished. "We are slowing down, I feel the speed dropping." Did one of the pilots sense the beginning of a disaster? Perhaps, but it was too late. The autopilot was deactivated. Hands tensed, eyes watched as the data disappeared from the screen. The nose of the plane rose slightly, then began to descend again, slowly but steadily. The plane descended toward the sea, losing altitude. At that moment, the whole world around the plane slowly collapsed. A minute later, the voices in the cockpit turned to cries of panic. One pilot said, "What's happening?" But it was happening so fast they didn't have time to look for an answer. They tried one last time to stop the plane from falling, but with everything spinning out of control, they had only one thing left: instinct. The plane began to accelerate even faster, and suddenly the dark face of the vast ocean loomed behind them like a giant shadow. When the cold, deep waters of the ocean confronted them, with that enormous weight, they would realize that it was all over. And then suddenly, everything went black. Did anyone hear a scream? Maybe, but everyone disappeared, like the end of a nightmare. The plane fell into an infinite void, and once again the sea, intoxicated by the darkest night, accepted this catastrophe. In just 4 minutes, nothing could be undone. In those minutes, the line between life and death was erased. Only the wreckage remained. The sky, the ocean, and a world were all that remained. But there was something at the bottom of the deep ocean. Lessons learned, perhaps never to be forgotten. Today I would like to tell you about one of the most tragic accidents in aviation history, Air France 447. On the night of June 1st, 2009, an Airbus A330 en route from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil to Paris was flying over the dark Atlantic Ocean when disaster struck. 228 people lost their lives in a tragedy in which several factors came together to create a chain of catastrophic events. This tragic event was not just an aviation disaster, but a catastrophe caused by a combination of technical failures, human factors, and systemic failures. Let us look at these causes one by one. 1. Technical problems. Icing on the speed sensors. One of the main reasons the plane crashed was a problem with the airspeed sensors. These sensors are critical to keeping airplanes flying at the correct speed. On Air France Flight 447, the plane entered a large storm at high altitude, and these conditions caused icing on the sensors. This icing prevented an accurate speed reading. As a result, the pilots in the cockpit could not make a correct decision because they did not know the actual speed of the aircraft. 2. Autopilot failure. Another important factor was the autopilot disengagement. The second reason why the flight came to this point was that the autopilot disengaged itself due to incorrect operation of the speed sensors. In this case, the pilots had to manually control the flight. However, there was insufficient training and preparation for such situations. As the aircraft climbed and descended rapidly, the pilots did not know how to react to these changes and lost control. 3. Human error and decision-making difficulties. In addition to technical errors, human factors also played an important role in the failure to prevent the accident. The pilots in the cockpit struggled to make the right decisions under time pressure. The plane was gaining altitude and losing speed, but they were not assessing the situation correctly. While the other pilot tried to understand the situation, there was confusion and the plane's descent rapidly deepened as a result of a misunderstanding. The panic of the moment made decision-making difficult. 4. Altitude and storm conditions. The plane had entered a severe storm over the Atlantic Ocean. This was another factor that caused the pilots to lose control. At high altitude, the aerodynamic structure of the aircraft was disrupted by the effects of the storm, resulting in a loss of speed. Storms can always make flying difficult, but it is a fact that more training is needed on how flight crews should act in such severe conditions. 5. Flight crew communication problems. Flight crew communication was also a major problem. The lack of communication between the air traffic control center and the cockpit made it difficult for the pilots to receive accurate guidance. The fact that different pilots perceived the same situation in different ways was also an important factor. As the aircraft performed a series of complex maneuvers, there was no clear communication between the crew, leading to a rapid escalation of the accident. I would like to describe not only the tragic consequences of the Air France 447 accident, but also the profound impact this event has had on the aviation world. On June 1, 2009, this disaster claimed the lives of 228 people. However, this loss was not only a tragedy that deeply affected their loved ones, but also an important turning point for safety, training, and technological advances in the aviation industry. 1. Human loss and the impact on families. The most tragic consequence of the crash was undoubtedly the loss of 228 lives. This loss was devastating not only to the passengers and crew on board, but also to the families they left behind. Each loss changed the lives of their loved ones forever. Many families spent the rest of their lives remembering their lost loved ones. Such tragedies are a reminder of how suddenly and unexpectedly death can strike and turn lives upside down. 2. Improving safety in the aviation industry. The Air France 447 disaster prompted a review of safety protocols in the aviation world. Investigations following the crash led to in-depth analyses of flight crew behaviour in times of crisis, communication failures, and technological weaknesses. The failure of speed sensors due to icing called into question the reliability of sensors on aircraft. This led to more robust sensors and safer technology for aircraft. After it became clear that autopilot systems needed to be designed more carefully, it was emphasised that pilots should receive more extensive training to be able to fly manually. 3. Pilot training and human factor implications. Another important consequence of the accident was the impact on pilot training and the human factor. It became clear that pilots' decision-making skills in stressful and challenging weather conditions need to be improved. This incident showed that cockpit crews need more training to communicate more effectively. It was also recognised that more simulation and crisis management training should be provided to enable them to make more informed decisions in unexpected high-altitude situations. 4th, reassessment of international aviation standards. After the accident, international aviation authorities developed various standards to prevent such an incident from happening again. Steps were taken to improve flight crew training, enhance the safety of aircraft equipment, and clarify the actions to be taken in the event of an accident. This process helped strengthen international aviation safety and set an example for other airlines. 5. Psychological effects and post-crisis recovery. In the aftermath of the accident, surviving families and others affected by the accident had to cope with prolonged psychological trauma. Aviation psychological support teams worked with families affected by the crash, but the effects of such a loss were felt for years to come. Another important lesson from the crash was that aviation companies should devote more resources to providing psychological support in times of crisis. The crash of Air France 447 showed us that safety is not only about technological innovation, but also about human factors. Pilot training, technology reliability, crew communication, and system resilience are the cornerstones of aviation safety. More innovation, more training, and more accountability in these areas are needed to prevent such disasters. Every airline, government, and aviation authority must work together to prevent accidents, learn from these tragedies, and make the future safer. Thanks. Would you like to share your ideas in the comments?